Well, first of all, again, I just want to welcome you all who are joining us from all over the world, as far as Egypt and South Africa and India and South America and Canada and I think Mexico too, but at least more than 32 countries. And thank you all for coming, and thank you, dear panelists, for coming from very far away as well, from Norway and UK and Lithuania. And we are very fortunate to have you all here with us. Sally and Sylvia and Charmaine and Genevieve and Magnus and Ramune and Joe. Ray will be, and Joe and Ray will be monitoring the chat, and Rafaela may join her for that. I wanted to say that this, as we all know, we're one of our elements, the elements of open dialogue, is tolerating uncertainty. And we started this, as Kermit said earlier, in the time of COVID, when we thought, seeing how dialogical practices were being implemented during this time and the usefulness of that and the challenges of that.
And also, in a way, the opportunities of that. It seemed that some of the elements of open dialogue that it's been a challenge to implement in the world as it has been, sort of found their natural expression in a time of crisis, which we've also found is often the case in the work, when things that it's hard to get people to see, in ordinary life, like the importance of gathering a network, the importance, responding immediately, being in the moment, not, letting go of preconceptions, tolerating uncertainty. Hard to grasp. Flexibility. As much as crises can be a challenge to that, they can also help us to see the necessity, if not the absolute fundamental reality, that's the world we live in. It's an interconnected, networked world in which we're all interdependent and mutually reliant. And so open dialogue actually offered a forum for people meeting that, arguably was hard to create in other times. And we were seeing that happen among the people that we've studied with and met, that they were actually doing that in a way.
Bringing people together through Zoom and going to people's houses through Zoom.
The fact that the clinicians were actually finding themselves visually in people's homes and having people see their homes, and that was a very leveling thing. Things like this, it leveled the hierarchy. We're all in it together in a way that, the power structures of the world that we were in have been very much wiped away. And the question is, what can we do to help maintain that?
It's one of the questions.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to invite all of you to introduce yourselves, perhaps with the focus of what's the history that brought you to this panel, to this work, to this panel, and a little bit of it. And then we'll go into your dialoguing amongst each other, and maybe you can respond to each other as that happens, if that feels right. Oh, Shauna, how wonderful to have you. Welcome. Do you want to come off mute and just say who you are and your connection here? Can't hear you. Okay. Before you do that, I want to say one more thing. Open Source Foundation has given funding for these. Open Society Foundation has given funding for these town halls, both to Madden America and to Open Excellence. And we just want to acknowledge that, and that Open Excellence and HOPENdialogue are our collaborators in these panels, in these town halls. So, and so I'm going to put myself on mute, and then whoever feels to begin, do.
You could begin by briefly introducing yourself and how you come, and what you do, and how you came to be interested in open dialogue in 3 sentences or less.
It's like a crossword puzzle.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Morning for those others and evening. My name is Sylvia Browning. I guess I'll jump in and go first. I am an LPC licensed professional counselor in Atlanta, Georgia, working at Grady Hospital. Introduced open dialogue in 2016 when we began doing open dialogue within our inpatient unit. We branched to outpatient. We still do a little bit of dialogic practice inpatient, and that's who I am. Nice to be here.
Hello, everyone. I am Ramunė Mazaliauskienė. I am from Lithuania, and I am a psychiatrist and systemic family therapist. And my experience with open dialogue started in 1996. And it started from workshops that were organized by Tom Andersen and Jaakko Seikola. So we had both open dialogue and reflecting team implemented in our hospital in Lithuania. So this was when I became interested in open dialogue, and that's why I am still within this group and within the team. So probably that's why I'm here today, and I'm glad to be. Welcome to everyone.
Hi, my name's Sally, and I come to open dialogue through receiving it on being discharged from hospital in 2016, and still receiving open dialogue via Zoom at the moment. So that's been very beneficial. I also really think that open dialogue should be for everyone. And so I've been on a dialogical peer support and relational recovery practice course, and I'm on a lived experience panel as well with open dialogue. That's me.
Hi, I'm Genevieve Williamson. I'm a psychiatrist at the University of Vermont Medical Center, and I work on one of our inpatient units. My colleague, Erin Curtis, was hopeful to be here, but is covering the floor for both of our patients while I attend an open dialogue trainers training. I was lovingly invited to be a part of this panel by Kermit and Louisa. And I heard a friend of mine at the training, a new friend of mine, say a feeling of deeply sure that this was the way of working for her. And I want to echo that I feel deeply sure this is a way of working for me.
I'm Joe Stoklosa, coming from Boston. I'm a psychiatrist at an academic teaching hospital called McLean Hospital. And I'm really grateful to be here and humbled and want to listen and learn. This really meets one of my values called Magis, or more, which is sort of trying to look at what are we doing, what can we do better. And I came to open dialogue in that way, wanting to do better primarily as an inpatient psychiatrist and dissatisfied. And so since 2015, tried to change how we do care on the inpatient unit at my hospital, but then also an outpatient and residential and other services in people's homes. And very excited to be here and learn from everyone.
Do you want, maybe I'll go next, seeing as there's still a problem. Hello everyone, my name's Charmaine Harris, and I have been invited by Kermit and Louisa today. I come from Stratford in East London, and I'm trying to think to say what I'm doing or why I'm here. I guess I wear lots of different hats. Firstly, I am someone with life experience that works within the NHS and also the third sector. I started working dialogically back in 2016 and am now actually one of the pod tutors on the residential programme we offer in London in the UK. So I guess really what I'm here today to do is speak less about my role as a tutor and more about my role as a founder. I founded Peer Dialogue, which involved me actually training a number of people with life experience that wanted to actually use open dialogue as a way of practice and helping other people. And I've run about 3 training programs of that and had small pockets of funding to deliver that in the community to the third sector. With sort of residents within the London Borough of Redbridge up until Havering in London. So yeah, with that in mind, that's me. As far as I know, I don't know any other peer-led, user-led service that's offering open dialogue outside of the NHS in the UK. So feel very proud and fortunate for my small team that have been doing that, and very happy to be here today.
Okay, my name is Magnus Hull. I'm a psychiatrist with the University Hospital of North Norway, where I work with the so-called drug-free treatment unit. I've done that for the last couple of years. I guess the reason why I'm here is that in the mid-80s, I was a part of a team at the hospital here that developed something called the Reflecting Team, or working with Reflecting Team, later developed into more relational web-oriented work, or working with the reflecting processes. And we had, I just checked this up today, back in 1987, we had a letter from Jaakko Saikula, who said that he had heard about us and he wanted to come and visit. And they drove up from Keropudas to Tromsø on a Thursday. It's a 600 miles, or no, 400 miles drive, and then they stay there for the night and the next morning, and then they drove back home. And since then we have cooperated. So that was back in 1988. And I guess that we have had a cooperation in different ways ever since then. Yeah.
Shauna, you could introduce yourself by chat too. Everyone will see that, and your voice can come that way. Thank you all for your words and your presence. Very grateful and honored to have you. When you spoke about the drive up to Tromsø, Magnus, my heart just got very big and warm, and that connection, that tiny connection, has made great things, very good things happen. including this event, that coming together. We had planned to have a reflecting team as part of this, but this particular panel has its own evolution and it's continuing to evolve. And I just want to say one more thing, that Cindy Peterson stepped off the board so that Sylvia could come on, so that we had a more diverse panel. And we apologize to everybody that we hadn't had a diverse panel, as diverse a panel as we should have. And so going forward, we'll have our awareness to having cultural and ethnic diversity on every panel, in the same way that we've hoped to have family members and people of lived experience and people from different countries. And there's one more thing about that. What was it? Yeah, there's more diversity that we hope to have too. Cindy was a voice of a family member as well as a person of lived experience, and also a trainer and a practitioner. So we miss her presence and honor her choice to make space for more voices, and hopefully another time she'll come on. Okay, so I'm going to, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to welcome all the viewers and everybody in the chat room, and say that everything that's happening in the chat room is at least as important, and probably much more important than anything we're going to talk about, that anybody who's actually pictured on screen might have to say. I mean, we're all here because of our experiences that brought us here, and we're all here because of whatever we've learned so far. But most importantly, we're here to learn together. And the questions that are raised, we may not find answers to, and we'll take as many questions as we can from the chat room and bring them into the conversation. But the reality, I think that being dialogical is much more about the questions that we talk about, and the fact that we're figuring out how to have an ongoing dialogue as we move together into the future. And we may not answer everybody's questions, and we may not answer any questions today. The important thing is how much we learn about how to talk together and figure things out as we go. I noticed that somebody expressed some disappointment that the viewers are not participating on video, and
the attendees.
The attendees, and all I can say at the moment is that is a technical challenge. I mean, it's technical just in terms of we're learning how to do all this. Mm-hmm. And it's just a procedural, practical, technical challenge to be able to do that. So I apologize that we don't have that capacity. Mm-hmm. And so in place of that, I'm just noting that everything that's going on in the chat room is at least as important. And we're doing our best to stay in touch and bring any questions we can to the discussants.
Yeah, and as we get better at it, we may have breakout groups so that people can see each other. But right now, we're so lucky to have who we have here to be able to speak. And Ray is going to bring questions to us to bring to the panelists. But as Kermit said, we can only have a few. So we step back and maybe you...
Questions and reflections and observations.
Yeah, comments.
We will do our best to bring however much we can into the conversation. Perhaps we could start with reflections from the panel on how your work in the inpatient units has changed or not changed since the start of the COVID crisis.
Okay, probably I can start with some news from Lithuania. And actually, when COVID crisis started, it was extremely heavy time for the treatment institutions, including mental inpatient units. I work in the hospital, so it was quite a difficult time, both for staff and especially for patients. We had to reorganize all the work, and it was reorganized in such a way that the patients, including acute psychotic patients, they had to be on quarantine for 24 hours in order to get the COVID test answer. So these were the regulations of our government, and we had to follow it. So it was extremely difficult to work because there was a lot of anxiety. People were lost, patients were extremely anxious. And I found out that having this very human contact, using open dialogue approaches helped a lot to decrease the anxiety of people in this very, very tough situation. And it was very good for staff as well. So, short experience from Lithuania.
Ramoni, I'm responding to somebody in the chat room who was asking what, to just explain what open dialogue is. Perhaps you could explain, when you say open dialogue helped in your work in the inpatient unit, how is that different from how, other ways of working?
Should I explain, or somebody else want to? I will explain it in my own words, because I understand that there is even some theoretical articles, what is open dialogue, principles and things like that. But for me, open dialogue is something like a very human way to talk with people. Not to talk to people, but to talk with people, responding to what they say, being very respectful, being, how to say, responsive, empathetic, and things like that. Just like having interchange of opinions. Well, it's quite complicated. Probably I have to open the scientific article and to read the main principles of open dialogue. But for me, as I said, it's something like a human way to talk with people, responding to whatever they tell you, even if these are very shocking, strange things, just responding. Maybe someone can tell something more what is open dialogue for them from the panelist.
Sorry, this is Genevieve Williamson again. I loved everything that was just said, and also thinking about transparency, about being with the people that we're working with when we all decide collaboratively about how we'll move forward. There was a question about, well, I alone don't want to say, but maybe we all have information to provide about how dialogic practices inform our day-to-day work. There was also this thought about in the pandemic, how the pandemic has informed our practice. I have had the experience that particularly in the beginning that monologic forces were strengthened related to stress. Really, it illustrated what happens for many of the people that we work with, that it can become harder to to listen and harder to hear and harder to speak when the system is stressed, when individuals are stressed, when families are stressed. So in a way, it was particularly difficult to stay open in the beginning. We are acclimating now, but yeah, a challenge.
Okay, hello again, everybody. My name is Sylvia Browning. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And I want to speak to a couple of things that was said. What is open dialogue? For me, just like Ramon, I can't tell you the technical things, but it is transparency, empathetic. It's more we and us than you. And I find myself when I go from the we approach and actually be empathetic with whomever I'm working with. You're not my patient, my client. We're in this together. And that's what I see open dialogue being. On an inpatient unit, one of the things that we have done during the pandemic, we've actually been able to get a couple more families present because of the Zoom, when before there were challenges in coming to the hospital. So in a sense, the pandemic has helped with some of our network meetings by getting the families into the meeting, actually into their homes. So that's been a benefit. One thing I noticed in the chat, I know a lot's coming in, but I want to speak to something that kind of stood out to me. One person expressed, how do you do this when others around you don't buy in? And I find that happening every day with myself. You just keep doing it. You keep modeling, and eventually people will figure it out and they'll join in. They'll see that what you're doing is actually working because it works.
Yeah, I think about this pandemic and the changes I've seen on our inpatient unit, and we had a number of rooms being held as sort of COVID rule-out rooms, and similar to what Ramuni, what you had said, of people having to stay in a room for periods of time, awaiting long tests. It was really hard and awful, and you know, for open dialogue, what is it? Some of it is that shared humanity, and in this crisis, we're sort of all vulnerable. We all have this fear, and the amount of uncertainty we have to tolerate, and the people we're trying to help have to tolerate, and everybody personally and at work, it's more. And so this way of working is kind of much more in line with the crisis, where everything is uncertain, and transparency as that element of it, of what we do in our unit is when we run a treatment plan and come up with what we're going to do, we do that all with the person we're serving there. And so the transparency of sharing kind of everything you know about what's going on, everything related to COVID, the need for transparency is sort of higher now more than ever. And Sylvia, to your point of families as well being kind of more involved, and we've certainly, whether on Zoom or all of these different video apps, we've been able to get networks together, because when I think of what is open dialogue, it's a network approach where you understand the issues and the stressors and the crises people are dealing with in the context of their network, and the problem is located within the network for all to be a part of, finding what to do and making decisions collaboratively as you walk together. And so being able to have people on screens more than we did before, even though there's this distance, that's been helpful. Also, just with the crisis, you know, we have to wear masks much of the time, and thinking about, is it better to be in person with someone with a mask on, or on a screen with someone where you can see their whole face, and all of these new questions of what does it mean to be with someone? How do I share that moment with them? these are some of the things coming up with the crisis.
Yeah, as others was talking, I was trying to listen, but I had these unheard voices happening, and I heard a client say to me, "It's care, it's care, it's care. It's the real form of care. It's not treatment, it's care." And care comes at a great cost to us, particularly in COVID. For the front line of us that go out and are responding to people's needs and providing that care. I've seen what it's done to colleagues that I work with within the NHS in various different capacities, but also in the third sector. And nothing changes its care, and care takes a lot from us. So I just really wanted to say, I echo what everybody else has said, but this is the real form of care. This isn't treating. This is free from that kind of stuff. Free from harm, free from coercion, free from force. This is about walking alongside people and caring for them.
If I may add something, I'm trying to catch some of the chats as they come up. Someone's saying that we're talking about how it works, but not necessarily the concept of what the principles are. So just want to talk about those 7 principles of open dialogue and how it works for us. It's that immediate help when a crisis happens. We're going in immediately to take care of it. As Joe mentioned, that network, forming that network perspective, bringing in those people that are part of your network. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be your cousin. It could be your mother, father, brother, sister. So just pulling that network together, that flexibility and mobility, which we have seen, of course, much more in our times of this pandemic. And one of the principles of responsibility, psychological continuity, tolerance of uncertainty, and that dialogue within itself. So those are some of the 7 principles of open dialogue. And the unique part about open dialogue is each area, each person, you make it fit for what your individual needs are.
I really appreciate that, Sylvia, and thank you for listing the 7 principles. I'm thinking about part of the crisis. Well, I think about the crisis. We, in where I work, people come to us in crisis, and also now we're part of the shared crises of our world. And thinking about part of being in community, part of being in network with people on the inpatient unit, I think for me has been to feel some of the resistance to these principles, not that comes from malice or from a desire to do harm, but as a response to fear, uncertainty, distress, and holding that, feeling part of that with the people that I'm working with, the people that are in the hospital that I'm working with, that we as a team are working with, has been really uncomfortable, but also so informative and helpful. So in a way, being transparent about that too has been important.
Another thought that pops up is the importance of language, and the language that we use and the words that we use when I think about open dialogue. And I think of in traditional care, there's this big gap with symptoms and diagnoses, and then actual human experience language of what's going on. In an open dialogue, you meet someone right where they're at, you use the words that they're using, and that really helps you connect and care, as Charmaine said. Being able to talk about something the way that somebody's talking about it, for me, is really part and parcel to like caring. And so and sometimes it's also helping someone find words. This way of working, these extreme states are partly conceptualized as the ultimate state of isolation. And so the approach is to help someone come out of isolation and connect in the world and find the right words to connect in the network and connect to others. And so this way of working is with a fine attunement to the language. As Tom Anderson says, language is not innocent. He talks about words as searching hands that grasp at meaning and create meaning and shape meaning, and can do a lot of good and can do a lot of harm. And the importance of languages and communication is really important in this way as well.
Joe, I'm really interested generally. I also work with medical trainees, and I think a lot about how to share this with medical trainees who have become accustomed to using the language of expertise rather than embracing the language of the people with whom we work, whose experience we're trying to share in. And so thinking about that a lot.
I don't know if I should talk again so soon, but since you invoked my name, I'll just say really briefly, I think about it as like translating. And that's how I talk about it with trainees, where in the traditional medical model, you're forcing the person that you're trying to help to translate what's going on into your world. In this way of working, we do all of the translating. If you have a thought about a diagnosis, your job is to translate that in a way to connect with someone. And so it shifts the responsibility in some ways of doing that translating. And the other thing is, this way of working takes a quiet voice and makes it louder, and a loud voice and making it quieter. And in working with a trainee, the diagnosis voice has been very loud, and the person's own experience language has been quiet. And so switching that power dynamic is very important.
Go ahead.
Well, I just was feeling, I'm appreciating everything each of you are saying, and I find myself being curious about Ramuni and Magnus and Sally's experiences. And Magnus, you've had a long journey with this way of working, longer than any of us. And I know that your work has evolved in Norway into having a meds-free ward in your community, which none of us have anywhere else in the world that I know of. So, I don't know, I just long to hear. And Ramuni, I know you've also been involved for a long time, and Sally, you've been in the thick of it. So I want to make sure that you add your wisdom to this mix.
First, I would say that that COVID hasn't really changed or had any influence on our practice, because we've been very in the outskirts of the COVID world. I mean, it's been, I don't think we've had anyone that's conceived COVID here in this part of the country since May or June. It's it's not very much of an issue, although we can't travel as much as we used to, and there's been the hospital has had to prepare for maybe there will come someone with COVID to the some of the psychiatric wards, but we haven't seen any so far. So, you know, wearing masks and all these things have not been an issue at all. So, but still we use a lot of video platforms in our work, and that's not because of COVID, but it's because we're a very small unit which has a very large, geographically large catchment area. So where I work now in the so-called drug-free treatment unit, that we should have a program that offers people help, people with serious mental problems, help that doesn't emphasize on drugs. That's a kind of a government decision in Norway. So that's a long story, and it's been driven by consumers or user organizations or advocates that's got the politicians to go for this, and that's why we have been able to open such a ward. As we're a very small ward in a big catchment area, some of the ideas that goes along with open dialogue or working with reflecting processes or working with treatment webs or networks has been very central to to the way that we try to develop our practice. We generally don't work with people in very acute crisis. We work with people that are referred, and when someone is referred to to this treatment program, now we will generally meet with the person referred and the referring person, and also with other people that are engaged in the situation that's led up to the referral. So we will have a kind of a big meeting with you know, family, local people from the local treatment network, family physician, people from a working place. There might be very many different people, and we will generally, in this setting, we will ask, you know, these questions that's been very central to us through our practice. We will ask something about the history of the idea that people want to come to us, so that they want some kind of meeting with us, so that they want something. And then we will try to work with things like that in this big network and try to find out how to go forward from that perspective. And we will emphasize many of the same ideas that you have in so-called open dialogue within this way of meeting people. And we will also then throughout, because we know that you know, we can't have a treatment program that is located to a small ward in Tromsø for people in this whole area. So we're just a part of a treatment program. We try to define ourselves as a part of a network and try to find out what are the important parts of this network, how can we listen to and relate to the different parts of this network, because you have to what should I say? You have to put emphasis on the fact that people are placed in relations. People live their lives in relations, and the main relation is, of course, not with the mental health professionals or health professionals at all. Most people like to live their lives in other connections, and that's what we work with, to try to see if it's possible for people to go ahead in their lives while we are a part of that network. So it's maybe some of the ideas from open dialogues are also central in this, and it's also to us, I guess, most people in our setting would say that we do not emphasize a lot on diagnosis, on symptoms. We emphasize more on recovery, what we think more about what people can do than what they can't do to get on with lives. Yeah, I guess that's enough.
So, Sally, I'd like to invite you to speak to your experience and any thoughts you might have about how we can help make what you experienced more available in the world.
Well, first, I'd just like to say, I think, like the others have said, words of transparency and walking with that person why they're having this treatment is right. But also I was thinking about trust and how I have complete trust within my open dialogue network. If that trust isn't there, then I won't necessarily listen to everyone. But because they believe in me, and I know I believe in them because of what Charmaine said earlier, is care. They care. I can honestly say that with open dialogue and my network, I've been with them for 4 years, and the care, the trust, transparency is all on the table. So, you know, I'm able to talk about my feelings and my emotions to really help to stop the conditioning from worsening, you know, from being able to have the tools to stop readmission into hospital. And so trust is a really essential part of the network as well. And that's really, you know, helped. Even when I got unwell again 2 years ago, and instead of being in an A&E suite with 3 psychiatrists determining whether or not I should be put into a hospital, my network were the voices that spoke to me about what was going on at that time. And I sat and listened to every single one, and then looked at my psychiatrist and was like, this is the only way forward, isn't it, to go into hospital just to sort me out a bit? And he said, it is, for your welfare. I think this is the only choice. And because of that trust and that care and the support and the transparency, I went. And instead of spending 3 or 4 months in hospital, I had done prior, I came out in 6 weeks. 6 weeks with open dialogue, being able to come through my crisis with me in hospital, being able to be with the other doctor on wards, having my care code, my social worker with me, in those doctors' meetings when I couldn't find my voice, because, you know, of being in a very distraught kind of scenario. So when I talk about open dialogue, I know 10 years ago what treatment is as usual in the UK, and it's nothing compared to what you get from open dialogue. It's nothing. You couldn't put a price on the treatment you get from open dialogue, because they just care so much about you as a person. So, yeah, does that answer the question, Kermit? Thanks.
Sally, your words brought tears all the way up my heart.
Louisa, I was feeling the same thing, Sally. As you spoke, so much came up. The passion that you have for the treatment. And so often people who go through lived experiences don't have the passion because the system can be very, very cruel. I'm curious to know, because I know my experience here in Atlanta, we have struggles with others. You know, a lot of the doctors are wanting to prescribe medication. And like I said, there's a constant battle with me trying to provide the dialogic approach when everyone doesn't have buy-in. So for those other ones in the US, it seems like it's working wonderfully outside of the US. You know, what are some of the, how are you getting past some of these struggles that I seem to have?
The topic around medication for me is I've changed my medication over the 2 years of being in recovery, and that's with the help of my psychiatrist in Open Dialogue. So I am on medication, but I'm on I probably nearly a quarter of the medication I was when I was in hospital 2 years ago. Unfortunately, when you go in hospital, they will just go, dunk, this is what you need, they put it up, you know, you can't function properly, I don't like the way I feel. But that's the dialogue that you have with your doctor in Open Dialogue. How are you feeling? Well, I'm sleeping for like 18 hours, this is not right. I don't feel, I'm not functioning as a normal person, meaning I can't really get out of bed because of medication. So we have a dialogue and medication's brought down. While I was in hospital 2 years ago, the doctor on ward actually mentioned another medication that she thought might be more appropriate for me. And in that 2 years, we've managed to take off one medication to come off, take off two medications to come on to one. So yeah, some medications, they don't work for people. But I had to have a little bit of that medication. But it's always on review and it's always coming down. So I know it's a very kind of complicated discussion, medications in different parts of the world. But I haven't been off medication in the last 10 years. So coming down so well and staying so balanced, especially over COVID. I think I live on my own in a flat, so I couldn't get to see my family and friends over COVID. My brother lives around the corner, and he actually said to me, he was like, I can't believe how well you're doing in the academic, in the kind of current situation we are in. That's just down to me having my routine, making sure I get out, I do take my medications. And also because I've been on medication for so long, if I know that if I come off of it too quick, too soon, I get unwell. So that's why I trust my psychiatrist, and we have that discussion. And it's being brought down all the time. I hope there is a day when I'm not on it, but I just have to see. So, but at the moment I'm fine. So that's where I want to be. I don't want to be in hospital. Does that answer your question, Sylvia?
It does for you, as far as how you are dealing with your medication. I'm glad that you shared that, because so many people think that the open dialogue approach means, oh, no medicine, but I know that there are places where medication is very, very beneficial and places where it might not be necessary. Part of my question was, looking specifically to some of our US practitioners and how they're managing the systems of medication versus not medication, when the system pushes medication. And you said, Sally, that you spent 6 weeks in the system for your crisis. Oftentimes here in the US, that's not possible. And so a little bit more dialogue on how others are doing it.
I'll just say quickly, Sylvia, like I'm in it, you know, like I'm always in it. And I don't have like a procedure for it, like just in it with each person, each, you know, network that we're meeting. And you're right, there are lots of forces that there are lots of monologic forces, period, about lots of things, and just trying to stay in it with each person, with each people that I'm meeting.
Thank you, Genevieve. I think one of my challenges is the fact, you know, you, Joe, you guys are all psychiatrists, MDs. And so if I'm working with a psychiatrist who doesn't buy in, it makes it a little bit more difficult for me. So thank you all for what you're doing.
You too.
I think about, you know, as we're changing hearts and minds of those around us, Genevieve and I, and all of us are really working within systems. And I think about, you know, we're sort of nudging that system in small and large ways in different times. And if it's too big of a nudge, then you'll be alienated or not accepted, or the doctor, like you said, won't be interested in what you have to say. And so I found is trying to implement all of this, it's sort of titrating your nudges and changing exactly how much you're pushing. And that's in some ways different than designing the system from the outside and then building all the people there. If you're working within the system, it's you have all of these forces, monologic forces, as Genevieve said, that you're up against, society and the hospital and all of these things. And you know, who's responsible for all of the outcomes, and it's a lot of challenges, but keep fighting the fight.
And don't be fooled, because I think although it might seem glossy in Europe, at least in the UK where I'm based in London, treatment as usual still trumps, right? We're in the middle of a research study, you know, the trial has not been proven yet. So, you know, we're still coming at it too. So we know what it feels like.
One of the elements that Sylvia mentioned is translated as polyphony. One of the elements that it's a beautiful word, and that means that we need all of the voices. And when Genevieve and Joe used the word monological, that's when one person has the authority to speak and other people don't, or the authority to decide. Sometimes that has to happen, but with Sally, with that beautiful example you gave where you listened to everyone in your circle and then you turned to your psychiatrist and said, I think I have to go in the hospital. I can't remember your exact words. What were your exact words there?
I think I have to go into the hospital. I think that's what I said.
Yeah.
I think I turned to him and said, I think we have to go into hospital.
Yeah. We came to that together. That's the polyphony.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't sit there and go, you need to go into hospital now. Like other psychiatrists, or they say it and walk out the room, or or go out the room and then come back in, and you'd be in a car going to a hospital. This is a very kind of holistic kind of way of dealing with mental health, open dialogue, and I haven't really seen that done or read how this is done anywhere, you know, else. Open dialogue feels very like natural, feels very holistic, feels very fluid. It's not just give you a pill and you're going to be better. It's combining voices, combining maybe medication, maybe not medication, combining just thoughts and, you know, stories that I have that I'm able to bring out to close the wound from the inside out, instead of sticking a plaster on it and then in a year's or 6 months' time it bursting open. So that's how I think of open dialogue. It's healing the wound from the inside out, like we do when we, you know, cause an injury to ourselves. We don't just, you know, stick a plaster in it and say that'll be all right. No, we're doing it the proper way. That's how I feel about open dialogue.
I'd like to, I'm trying to weave together into a question.
Thank you, Sally.
Yeah, beautiful, for healing from the inside. Yeah. That's beautiful. I feel that touches on that to the degree that open dialogue has been an inspiration for how to work. I think it has something to do with how it touches something very actually essential to being human that perhaps other ways don't really get to. I mean, of course, you know, of course we have medical problems that need to be addressed, and if they aren't, we can't speak or relate to others as well as we might. But ultimately, I think we're dealing with things that are essential to just the whole experience of being human, and that open dialogue really tries to hold all of that. It's not about excluding anything. I'm trying to weave together a lot of the threads of questions that are coming up in the chat. And I'll put it this way, you know, I think a lot of us who come to these dialogues come hoping to understand open dialogue and maybe to be a part of it, or maybe to access it, or maybe to find it for the people we care about. And it's very frustrating because we find, you know, a lot of people experience that they can't get the help, they can't participate in open dialogue, they can't get the training, you know, they can't. And one of the ironic things to me is that in the 20 or so years that I've been exploring this, it seems to me most of the people who are interested in open dialogue, also hardly anybody feels like they're at the center of it. Hardly anybody feels that they're, you know, that they're in, and they, you know, that they're, everybody, even up to Jaakko, I'd say, even up to one of the originators, it's hard to feel that you're really a part of it. And I feel like that's part of what it is that being human means trying to feel that you are part of the dialogue that makes up your world. So I guess the way I'll put it to this is, all of you, in the experience that you've had and the experience you've had as part of open dialogue service in whatever way it is, what do you take from that as an inspiration for how to live, how to take it into your world, how to respond to all the crises that arise in our lives by inviting dialogue, by getting better at being dialogical? What have we learned about that?
Embodying it.
Yeah.
And one of the things Jaakko will say is that we have to embody dialogue.
I feel as though I'm talking too much. It's a part of me. It's what I can say, you know, and participating in the International Dialogic Practice Training right now, and being a part of open dialogue has actually shifted the way I communicate with people in my personal life. it's enhanced it. And so it aids in communication. So if you're practicing the dialogic practices, it just becomes a part of you. I think that if you don't believe in it and you're part of the system that's doing it, it's hard to, you can't, yes, it has to be within you. You can't make, it's not a taught concept. It's something that you're passionate about and that's within you.
That question makes me think of last Christmas. Christmas is always really like hectic and you want to see people and never get to see the right people in my family, and sometimes we're left alone and we shouldn't be. And so I decided to have a family meeting, like I would do an open dialogue kind of meeting, and everyone had to go around and really talk about what they wanted at Christmas and how they thought, you know, what their thoughts and feelings. And so we really, really embraced it. And when we had our next pod session, our open dialogue session, we brought that discussion up because it was something that we thought that was just, you know, wanting to come out of all of us. And it was a discussion instead of like a heated row, and, you know, and that's what open dialogue is about. It's about having other voices, having other viewpoints, talking about those viewpoints, resting with those, and really seeing if someone can't do something, why they can't do it. And so we kind of brought that into our family network and discussed it like an open dialogue session. It really helped when we had the Christmas that we wanted to, so it was good.
I was working in my garden the other day and I was trying to remove the weeds, and it was crabgrass I was going after, and I've had a really hard time with the crabgrass. It keeps growing back, and I read more about it, and it's hard because it's rhizomatic, and this word rhizome, where there's no one central spot, you pull it out and it's gone. It's this equal network of appendages that are stronger together, that can adapt no matter what I do to try and fight it, that keeps growing no matter how little rain there is. And so this word rhizome, I learned from Mary Olson in my training in open dialogue, that it's a rhizomatic treatment where there's no head. We're all equals. There's no one central part. We're all a part of it. And that equality is something I think about as I bring open dialogue into my life. And for me, it also makes me think about social justice and the movements going on right now that are really rhizomatic movements with many people involved rather than a single leader. And one more tangent, that I read a paper about rhizomatic social justice movements, and they were looking at what are the roles people play in these. And there's often an organizer, a storyteller, and an advocate. And I've just been reflecting on that lately, of what are the roles in my rhizomatic movements in life and my rhizomatic sort of open dialogue care that I should be playing.
Privilege come to mind for me, especially when you was just speaking. Actually, I was thinking about my treatment as usual colleagues, and whether I would still be working in the NHS if I was having to work in that way. Privilege. Then I was thinking about the clients I work with and the fact that many of them have got families that will sit and give them a chance to be heard or be with them, or will take responsibility or accountability for their part. Privilege. And the list could go on and on and on. And that's why, for me, I think it was so important to get peer dialogue within the community, because I do agree with what I've heard here. This isn't about a medical model way of working. This is much simpler than that. It's just about being human. It's about respecting people, not compromising your boundaries for money or your values. It's about being treated how you would want to be treated, or if someone you love was having to receive care from somewhere, wouldn't you want that? So I just think, for me, I take away privilege. I feel privileged to be able to work in this way.
We can't hear you, Shauna, sorry.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring in a question that might open up an interesting line of discussion. The question is about open dialogue with children. I'm wondering if anybody has experience working with children, doing open dialogue with children. What I'm thinking is that would be a pretty good example of how to really go back to the roots of the problems that we deal with.
So in the UK, we were contacted by a headmaster. We were funded by Big Lottery to give out something that might look like working dialogically. And we work with a number of schools offering what we call talking spaces. And a young boy had put a bread knife to his mum and had been presenting in some ways in schools that seemed quite dangerous. I don't like to sort of give too much content when talking about children, but again, it worked just as it would if it was, I've seen it work with adults, with time and trust and care, and a bit of creative way of working. I mean, we always, we go in and say we're doing some chefing. So, especially working with children, you don't know what ingredients you need when you go into work with families, and ideally it's for us all to kind of put a little bit in the pot and see how it comes out. But I think anything is better than nothing. And there was a lot of, I know that there is a lot of social workers in children's services particularly interested in this way of working. But in a role I've just taken on with West London Foundation Trust, I know that CAM, so that's Children and Young Adult Service, there are keen to see what sort of introducing more sort of lived experience roles or dialogical roles within their services could look like.
I'm moving over to a comment that's come in that's very strong, and it's a comment from a mother whose name is Martha. And I can really relate to this because I am a mother, and my son went through we all went through a very, very, very hard journey. So I want to read her comment. I think this meeting is for professionals. I want to say about that part of my commitment in being involved with this way of working is to create alternatives for what we went through as a family. So I just want to say that to Martha. luckily I was able to do that and to be able to do what I can. But here, so Martha goes on to say, there is no help for the average suffering person in this country. I've looked everywhere to the point where I'm burned out. I wish I were dead, and my son also, I suppose. Better than a life suffering this treatment's trap. I'm extremely disorganized. I'm extremely discouraged. Have been advocating for my son for years. I cannot handle one more trauma. I'm traumatized along with him. He now suffers heart damage and brain injury from being kicked in the head. There is no hope for us. Where is there any hope? So, reading this, I don't know, my heart goes out to you, Martha, and to your son and your family, and welcome to be in touch by email afterwards, or you could text your email, your address to me, and or to any of us, I think, and we can put our heads and hearts together about where you are. And I feel like there is hope, but it's a long journey. And the hope is that this is happening in places in the world, but it's not happening in my community. I mean, we are a very small team working in New Mexico, trying to bring other people into it, but there's a lot of the dominant way of working that is hard to integrate. I think, Joe, you have a lot of experience of working with. Maybe you could speak to this about the hope, or anybody, any of you.
I loved thinking about hope. I feel like it's the most important ingredient for all that we do. And a quote came up into my mind that I think, Sylvia, you actually told me during our 3-year training with Mary Olson. We're both in together, but it's sometimes when I feel I've been buried, I've really been planted. And it's sort of, for me, just reminds me that even in the lowest points, there's reason to have hope. You know, we have our network here of people working to change things from the outside, from the inside, in every direction. And reminded me of another thing I heard recently, that there's 2 types of people in this world. There's good people, and there's good people in pain. And it's we're all in all of these buckets at different times. And I think there's reason for hope. I think that the idea that we can keep changing the system and keep doing things better, I think exists. I think there's hope too in changing the training systems. And I know that's some of the stuff that we're doing as we teach residents and medical students kind of new ways of working, as well as social work interns and nursing students and nurse practitioner students. And so I think there's hope that we'll keep carrying forward, both in the future, but help each other now.
Thank you, Joe. I'm aware that we have about 10 more minutes, and maybe we could all speak to where there is hope. Where is there any hope, was Martha's question. Where is there any hope? And I wish, Shauna, your voice could be on, because you're bringing a lot of hope to. Genevieve had to leave. I'm not sure what called her away, and so did Ramune, but I'm sure I wish that we could have their voices here. And I'm thinking on the chat, there's people, maybe you guys could also weigh in about this. Where is there any hope?
And one thing Joe said, and Joe, that wasn't me. I don't know who gave you that, but it's a good quote. Hope, that's one thing I try to instill each day. I think sometimes we might not be able to change the system, but if you instill the sense of hope, that gives you the power to continue to work towards a solution. And that's my goal with each person that I work with, is to just get that hope within them. And it's different for each and every one of us. And I see where somebody said sometimes when you're buried, you feel like you're unable to breathe underground. The hope is that someone else is going to come along and water you, and you're going to grow. But there's hope, even when, you know, I know, I think it was Bill Ocean, I think that's his name, asked about have you been a patient? You know, sometimes even if you haven't been a patient in a mental health facility, as a person that's gone through struggles, sometimes you're able to recognize certain things and find that hope from within. And other times, as you said, if you've been tortured through the system and the treatment and the struggles, and my heart goes out to Martha, because you can't find any answers. Open dialogue is it. You might not have it in your community, but you've found a panel of people. Carmen and Louisa work tirelessly, and they will connect you with someone that's close to you to help you get that sense of hope back.
I've been remembering, you know, there was no open dialogue until there was open. Well, that's not true. That's not fair. There's always, you know, dialogue is part of who we are. Open dialogue, I think, was about remembering that in contexts where it is sometimes at risk of being forgotten. And what I'm remembering is that, you know, in the development of it in Tornio, they just basically at one point found that if they took their attention off of trying to fix a problem and simply put it on trying to create a safe space for dialogue, that problems up to and including psychosis, almost to their surprise, would often resolve. And I think that's one of the fundamental parts of what we're doing here, is trying to remember that, so when I think of hope, I think of just trying to keep the dialogue going. And in my work as well, that has been the case. When I took my attention off of trying to, you know, determine who was right or wrong, or prove somebody wrong, or, you know, prove that I was right, and just tried to keep the dialogue open, it tended to end up where I hoped it might go. So maybe one way to answer the question of hope is just to put our attention on keeping the conversation going, which of course is a lot of why we do what we're doing here.
I was thinking about the question and thinking about if someone was to ask me that, well, even an hour ago, before I joined on here, I guess my world is so fluctuated, but sometimes hope can be dangerous, real dangerous. But then I just looked at Sally and I was like, wow, there's hope. So that's what I would say to anyone here in Martha's situation, and to Louisa and to all the other people out there that know what that feels like. Look at people like Sally, and that's hope.
I suppose hope is a little different for me than it may be for others. And it's more of like a metaphor for me. It's making sure that even though there's darkness, I can always see the light, and that light brings me hope every day, and that moves me forward. And to move forward and carry on, to be well and strong and be me, is to keep doing what I've been doing over the past 4 years, even though, you know, I got on well, but I pick myself up and I get on and I go again. So it's moving forward. Privileged that I managed somehow to come across this open dialogue when it first come, you know, when I was where I was at the time. I'm very privileged. I know so many people that don't get the help that they require, and are still traumatized by stuff. So I'm just, yeah, I'm always hopeful for the next day and carrying forward and moving forward, and that's, you know, that's how I get along. So sorry if that's different for everyone, different from the others.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, everybody, for responding. Magnus, there's a question that someone's asked about the drug-free ward, and we're down to 3 minutes. So I was thinking to direct him to the Mad America article that Bob Whitaker did about the drug-free ward. Is there anything else that you think could be helpful? They're asking, how does one would love to hear more about the drug-free unit, how it operates, how does a patient find themselves on the unit? What happens if they change their mind about the use of medicines? So that question was asked. There were a lot of really good questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but do you have any?
Yeah, I guess there are there are many big issues there, and what I've been thinking about now while we've been talking here is that it seems to me that it's kind of difficult to say how far it's possible to develop these ideas within the framework of a medical model. I think that's, at least in my experience, that's part of what we're struggling with, because we work in a system where you solve problems, and you don't want problems to dissolve, you want to solve them. We work within a system where you work with symptoms. You don't work with people's abilities, you work with their disabilities. So how far is it possible to develop ideas like the ones you have in open dialogue or similar approaches within a system like that? I think that's a big challenge, and that's also a very concrete challenge for us, trying to develop a so-called drug-free ward within the framework of a psychiatric hospital. Yeah. It's a challenge, because and I feel that we're kind of pushing that the border, whatever you might call it, when we try to do this. We get a lot of criticism from the so-called established psychiatry, which is very natural, because this is, I mean, we're putting an emphasis on other things, and there are so strong forces that want more mental health. There are very strong forces that want more mental health, and and I think it's kind of, it might not be possible to unify, you know, this field in a way with all these different directions at the same time. So I think that's a big challenge also for us that try to promote certain ideas, that, you know, changing the system from within is only possible to a certain degree. And I'm not sure where we are in that respect now. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the drug-free ward, it's you know, it's a part of a hospital, and we try to utilize some of these ideas, which are very, I mean, many of the ideas in open dialogue are very basic ideas that kind of got lost. I mean, it used to be natural to talk with people where they are and to take their network into consideration and to be aware of things like you should be in an open dialogue approach. This used to be a natural thing, but it seems that, you know, the medical approach kind of forgot a lot of this and became more interested in trying to translate your problems into my understanding and then try to translate them into something that I could deal with as a professional and then give you my solution back in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it time?
It's time,
yeah, we're going to have to close off. I just want to explain about Shauna. Thank you very much, Magnus. I want to understand those questions of solve and dissolve. And I wanted to explain to everybody who's still on the call that Shauna is the new executive director of Open Excellence, and it's a foundation that's been, I think, about 8 years and is really working with these things, these issues. You could look up their web address, and Shauna's just taken over the leadership of that foundation. And I wish, and the reason that she hasn't been talking is because her technology is not letting her talk. So she's just been a dear presence with us, silent presence, but very much of a presence. And thank you, everybody, Sylvia, Magnus, and Charmaine, and Sally, and Joe, and also Genevieve and Ramoni, who had to step off, and also dear Cindy Peterson, who was going to be on and stepped off. So we'll hope for more times of gathering with all of you somehow. And thank you all for being part of this town hall. Yeah.
Thank you.